Hello once again, this is Kenneth Weber and the Voice of Reason. What I want to do today is to clarify a statement that I made in a previous video concerning why I believe abortion was established. In that I stated that abortion was established to give a woman equal sexual rights, not equal rights with a man. And to further explain that I'm not fighting against the justifiable rights that was given to women back during that legislative process, I am fighting against this particular law that was passed, giving a woman the right to an abortion. First, in establishing an equal right for a woman with abortion, for it to be an equal right, someone prior to the woman would have had to have that right, the right to speak death unto a child while it's in the womb. And based upon my research and my understanding is that no one prior to a woman or since a woman was given this power has that power. Not the U.S. government, not the Supreme Court, not any branch of legislative branch has the power to just decide that a child is going to live or die. So in enacting this right by the U.S. Supreme Court, they wasn't giving the woman an equal right, they were giving her an exclusive right above all of the rest of mankind. So in essence, what they did was, the U.S. Supreme Court did was unconstitutional because the law in itself gave her an exclusive right, and that exclusive right was based upon gender, and that's what they were fighting against in the beginning, against laws that prohibited them based upon their gender. So they established a law based upon gender, giving her an exclusive right, violates the very purpose of them fighting for equal rights unto a man, because it gave a woman the power and ability to engage in sexual activity without any sense of responsibility, saying that that was the power and the ability that a man had. He can engage in sexual activity without any responsibility, which in itself is really not true. Because if the woman decides that she wants to keep the baby, and the man decides he don't want the baby, that he will just engage in sexual activity just for pleasure, then that man has no rights. So it's an inequality. He has, and it required by the same U.S. Supreme Court, by the same government of each state, he's required and held accountable for providing for that child for 18 years. So how is it an equal right for the woman to be given the power to decide she would just engage in the sexual activity for pleasure, when the man, if he decides that he was disengaging for pleasure, is going to be told, you may have been engaging for pleasure, but you're going to be held accountable and responsible for this child for 18 years. That in itself is an inequality. You can't establish equality by creating an inequality and then calling that justified. The establishing of the law of abortion was unconstitutional. You may ask, well, how did this law pass? Let me explain to you what I learned about the legislative process. I had the privilege back in my hometown of New Orleans to be in a church where the pastor got involved in the legislative process and went back and forth to our state capitol on a daily basis along with other leaders in the church to get involved in the laws that were being passed in our state. And they in turn would communicate back to the church what laws were being, what legislation was being introduced for approval. And we would call our legislators and let them know our opinions upon these particular laws. And through the involvement of people and the knowledge, people being made knowledgeable, many things that were set to be enacted into law were prevented because of our knowledge. Well, during the process of me going up there, I had the privilege myself of going up there one summer with one of the legislative leaders in the church to learn the process of how laws operate and to be involved in the process of working to hinder certain laws being put in place. Well, one thing that I learned during that visit up to the Capitol was that if a legislator had a bill that he wanted to try to pass into law, but he knew that that bill would not pass standing on his own, if another legislator had another bill that they were trying to introduce, well, they would in turn tell that legislator, look, I'll support your law if you allow me, or your bill, if you allow me to attach this particular bill that I'm trying to pass onto that bill. And for instance, if a legislator was introducing, and I said, we want to institute a statewide curriculum for kindergarten through third grade, and another legislator had legislation that they wanted to introduce teaching accepting homosexuality to kindergarten through first grade. Well, he knew that that legislation introducing homosexuality to kindergarten through third grade wouldn't pass on its own. But under the umbrella of just a curriculum, then that legislation could be passed into law without the people really knowing what they were voting for, because when it's presented to the governing body as a bill, that particular fact is being left out of it. And it's not made known until the fact that the bill has been passed into law, and then we find ourselves dealing with something and we're wondering why we got there or how we got there. Well, that's exactly what happened with the abortion. Abortion was introduced as an equal right, when in fact it's not an equal right, because no one ever had that right. No one still doesn't have that right. If the United States Supreme Court today would decide that because of the economic state of our nation, that we're going to, any child that's born outside of wedlock, where the parent, there's not a mother and father in a home with an income that's able to provide for that child, and that child would have to be supported by a welfare system that's through the government, well, we want that child aborted because we can't afford it. I guarantee you that every women organization, the ACLU, and everybody else would rise up and tell the government that they don't have the power to make such a decision. Well, if the U.S. government don't have the power to make it based upon economic condition or situation or circumstances, well then how can the U.S. Supreme Court give the woman the same power that it could not give to itself? When we get right down to it, that the law of abortion is unconstitutional. It was established for the exclusive right of giving the woman freedom to express herself sexually, just like a man, without any responsibility or accountability. And that in itself, giving her that power, is creating an inequality. Because the man neither has the power to decide whether or not a child lives or dies, so that's an inequality. Secondly, if the mother decides she wants to keep the baby, then the same Supreme Court, the same government of the United States and every other state requires that father to provide for that child for 18 years. So how can you create an equal law by creating an inequality based solely upon gender? Abortion was established upon gender, and we're fighting laws to tear down laws established based upon gender. Again, that makes it unconstitutional. So I mean, when we look at abortion just for what it is, we have to conclude that it's an unconstitutional law. We have to conclude that that baby has a right also. Because in establishing this law, once again, we overriding due process of law. We overriding trial by jury. We allowing the woman to give a sentence upon that child, which the states state that the Constitution of many states stating their law that life begins at conception. So they're acknowledging that's a life, but they're giving the woman the right to speak death to that child without any consequence. That in itself is unconstitutional because it violates the rights of that child. It violates due process. It violates trial by jury. It violates the fact that they must be found guilty of a crime, and there's no crime that is committed by that life. So we're violating the Constitution of the United States in order to create a right for women. I'm sorry. It's not a constitutional right. It's an unjustifiable law enacted for an unjustifiable cause. And for that reason, we must, as a society, begin to stand up and acknowledge our error. We must overturn Roe versus Wade. We must do it for ourselves. We must do it for the future generations. We cannot continue to act as though we don't understand why our children are acting irresponsibly sexually. When we told them and enacted laws to give them a woman the power to act irresponsibly sexually, to give her the power to just enjoy her sexuality without any consequences, without any responsibility, and then we sit back and wonder why our children are doing the same thing. They're doing it because we legalized it. They're doing it because we set the precedents. They're doing it because we established it and we set it into law. And it's our responsibility to turn it around. It's our responsibility to say that, hey, we can't continue to do this. It's our responsibility to say that we can't continue to shed innocent blood of these children, these babies, and expect our children to understand that there's a value to life. Every legislator, every judge, every Supreme Court justice must go back and revisit this law and acknowledge our error and turn this thing around. Roe versus Wade must be overturned. It's not an option. It's a constitutional right thing to do. It's not a choice. We really don't have a choice. We have a responsibility to hold every person, male or female, responsible for their actions. I need your help. We can't enter in this battle alone. I need your help to help me to fight this battle, to help me to undo this unjust law. You can contact me at ealmtjc@gmail.com. That's ealmtjc@gmail.com. I need your support. I need to hear from you. For now, this is Kenneth Weber, and this is the Voice of Reason.